Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your man B. I am the brand once again, and I'm excited to tell y'all that I'm gonna come through with the book reviews today. You know what I'm saying? I got a couple books to show y'all real quick. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna take too long, but this one right here, a beast. This is the narrative of Frederick Douglass, and I got ancient Egyptian religion for you. You know what I'm saying? So we gonna start it with this one right here. All right. Ancient Egyptian religion. You know, this joint was very insightful. It went through like the different gods and how they are perceived. You know, and how they believe they were perceived in ancient Egypt. Some of the symbolism. You know, some of the creation stories and stuff like that. And it tries to give it to you, you know, with the in the context of how Egyptians lived socially, you know, back then, politically and everything. Um, so, you know, it touches on the fact that a lot of, you know, the symbols and the gods have um, have alternate meanings. You know, it's like 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 layered meanings. So, you know, you may see, you know, you like when you may see the hieroglyphics of Nut and Gab and Shu, you know, it has a layered meaning as of, you know, how they perceive their gods in human form, you know, the questions that the gods may lead them to make about nature and, you know, about existence, you know, so it touches on the natural. A lot of them touch on the natural world, the metaphysical and existential, you know. So um like it goes through a lot of it, you know. It goes on the change in the permanence in literature and art, you know, the Egyptian hope, like the way of life and stuff like that, and you know how they believed, you know, their how they believe the afterlife, you know, will be and stuff like that, you know. The 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 changing of nature, but at the same time the permanence of nature and the you know, a lot of the positive and negative. It talks about Ma'at. I mean, it goes thoroughly in. What I don't like about it is that it had got pretty biased when it came to, you know, race. You know what I'm saying? So it had mentioned this Stella about, you know, how I think it was Ramses and the his war against the Nubians and stuff like that, and he tried to use that example as to try to, you know, separate Egypt from the rest of Africa. But when you look deeper into, you know, the sources and look deeper into the religion and the their text and their um, depictions of themselves, you know, I mean, the answers are right there in your face. You know, they look like me and you. But, you know, it's a very insightful book to read, to have in your collection. It's written by Henry Frankfurt. So, you know, um, he's not a black scholar to take word from. However, you know, I do believe, you know, even every scholar or every person who has done research on these subjects, you know, have a considerable opinion, you know what I'm saying? And it's something to consider. It's something to consider, you know, especially to cross analyze with somebody else, you know, a black researcher who has done similar work. So yeah, check it out if you can. Ancient Egyptian religion. The next one, this my man right here, Frederick Douglass, the narrative. So a little bit of background. I live like pretty much down the street from the Bama, you know what I'm saying? Like down the street around the corner type stuff, and I never I never really considered that, until about 10 years ago, when I actually, moved around here. I've been to his house before several times. It's a museum now. I encourage anybody to go there, but when I actually moved around here, that's when it was like, dang, we live close as a mug to Frederick Douglass. And like, dude was a beast. You know what I'm saying? When you go into his house, you can see the rest of DC. You know what I'm saying? It's up on a hill, so you can see all of DC from his house. You know what I'm saying? And it would be considered a mansion at that time. So he had the bread. His story is incredible. And I first read the narrative of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, back. I think it was even high school or college. It was one of those books that really encouraged me to start reading, and the reason why was because in the narrative, he talks about how, he had to manipulate, well, it talks about how at first he had, his master's wife had taught him to read. And then he saw how the master had got mad at her for teaching him how to read. And he knew from there, it was like, dang, this must be something serious right here. And so then he ends up manipulating, the little white kids in the neighborhood to continue his education to read. So he'd be like, oh, I know that word and you don't. And the kid would be like, oh, no, you don't. And then it'd teach him how to read. Or he'd be like, oh, yeah, I can write better than you. And the kid would be like, no, you can't. And then, he'd just mimic everything they did. So boom, when he learning how to read, sparked the fire in his mind to be like, look, I gotta get out of here. You know what I'm saying? It's a better world out here. And they talking about freedom and this and that. I need a part of that. That's me. You know what I'm saying? I'm a man. I need freedom and liberty just like everybody else. So he ended up hatching the plan to get up out of there, and he escaped from slavery. So that whole thing right there was like, whoa, because he was able to learn how to read, like I said, it sparked that in his mind to be like, look, I can do this. There's something to these words. There's something to these letters, so that's why I read this book often. But with this one included, with the narrative, it included a lot of his other writings that I never read, never looked into. So it has the heroic slave in it. This was a really good story. It was one of his fictions that he wrote about a slave who was able to escape. And it had a real good plot twist to it. Then it had some of his speeches, and his speeches this time is what blew my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like the meaning of July 4th for the Negro. Like when we read about these people, these historical figures like Frederick Douglass, it's important to really read their words, and take their words into consideration, as especially in context of the time that they living in. What's incredible about him is that a lot of these speeches, he is going in on the on white folks, because of the hypocrisy in slavery and there being, freedom up north and still being slavery down south, and the fact that European countries were already getting away from it. You know what I'm saying? He was going in on these people, and it's crazy because at the time when he wrote the meaning, or when he gave the speech of the meaning of July 4th for the Negro, mind you, slavery was still going on. This was in 1852. Slavery was still going on. He was an escaped slave talking mad trash to these white folks in their face. You know what I'm saying? In New York or wherever he had this speech at, going in at a time when you had slave catchers able to, to come and get you at any time. You know what I'm saying? Them slave catchers could have used the Fugitive Slave Act to go get you and pick you up anytime. But he was going ham. You know what I'm saying? Like, the meaning of July 4th for the Negro, I mean, it's just some of this stuff he says in here. Like, the fleshmongers gather up the victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number has been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night, for since the anti-slavery agitation, a certain caution is observed. Going in, called them fleshmongers. Hey, young, he, like, I mean, this joint goes in, but at the same time, he highlights, a really incredible point in here, and that often is still echoed, that that July 4th isn't for us. You know what I'm saying? The July 4th was a celebration for them. For them, it was hypocrisy for them to celebrate it while you still have slaves in your backyard. That's what the whole speech was about. Then he had fighting rebels with only one hand. With this one, he going in about how, the pretty much at this point in time, the war had started, and you have Confederacy that is enlisting black people into the army, while you have the North not letting black people into the army. So he's saying, and this is that the North is being hypocrites, because in the North is free. It's free in the North, but we have the traitors down South. You know what I'm saying? That we're fighting against, the expansion of slavery towards the West. We're fighting against that, but at the same time, these people are treating their ex-slaves like men in the army. You know what I'm saying? But we up here are being hypocrites and fighting rebels with only one hand, because they only was fighting with white folks, but wouldn't let the black people, fight for they brothers' freedom as well. I mean, and he pretty much, goes in and talks about how he understands that, and this is also, and he talks about how he understands that, the black people in the Confederate States are pretty much fighting as loyal people to their states. So he understands why the folly in their thinking, but even then, he's like, man, look, y'all need to let us fight too, so we can, win this war. We need to end slavery, period. So then he talks about, what the black man wants, another great one. And like, reading stuff like this, it totally blows out any assumptions that the Republican Party today is the Republican Party of Lincoln. This is, like, reading stuff like this totally blows that out. It says, It's it. Oh, and it also blows out any assumption that the Civil War was not for slavery. It says it is a significant fact. It is a marvelous fact. It seems almost to imply a direct interposition of providence that this war, which began in the interest of slavery on both sides, bids fair to end in the interest of liberty on both sides. It was begun, I say, in the interest of slavery on both sides. The South was fighting to take slavery out of the Union, and the North was fighting to keep it in the Union. The South fighting to get it beyond the limits of the United States Constitution, and the North fighting to retain it within those limits. The South fighting for new guarantees, and the North fighting for the old guarantees, both despising the Negro, both insulting the Negro. So he going on both sides of this in this one, saying how, again, the South was trying to expand slavery towards the West, and the North was saying, nah, just keep it here, and we just going to expand free, towards the West. So they was trying to keep the old, pretty much keep the status quo. The North was trying to keep the status quo. The South was trying to keep it going towards the South. Towards the West. And yeah, he goes in on this joint, but that just shows you, that the war was definitely about slavery. You getting this from an incredibly intelligent black man who was a slave at this time. And this one, he got an appeal to Congress for impartial suffrage, so this one is after the Civil War, and he talking about how black people should get every right as a citizen, meaning we should be able to vote, move freely. We should be able to do whatever we want as citizens, and he talks about the importance of voting because as a man, it gives you the right to your own destiny in politics and, within the political atmosphere, meaning you don't have a king or, a dictator to rule over you. You are able to vote for your people locally and vote for your people, nationally. All right, and then it talks about again. Oh, and this one talks about how the state rights, like a lot of the state rights situation that is totally against what he's talking about is totally against the current Republican Party. It says the rebel states have still an anti-national policy. Massachusetts and South Carolina may draw tears from the eyes of our tender-hearted president by walking arm in arm into Philadelphia Convention, but a citizen of Massachusetts is still an alien in the Palmetto States. There is that all over the South, which frightens Yankee industry, capital, and skill from its borders. We have crushed the rebellion, but not its hopes for malign purposes. So yeah, he talks about all of that. It was one particular place, like oh, here we go. Oh, here we go, right here. But why are Southerners so willing to make these sacrifices? He's talking about how Southerners are willing to make all of these sacrifices after the civil rights, as far as letting go of slavery and stuff like that. However, the only thing that they did not want to give up was the vote. And why? Because if they gave up the vote, that gave up the power that they had in the southern states, because the population of black people was so high. He says it right here: the South will comply with any conditions but suffrage for the Negro. It will swallow all the unconstitutional test oaths, repeal all the ordinance of secession, repudiate the rebel debt, promise to pay the debt incurred in conquering its people, pass all the constitutional amendments. It only, if only it can have the Negro left under its political control. He goes on to say, but why are the Southerners so willing to make these sacrifices? The answer plainly is they see in this policy the only hope of saving something of their old sectional peculiarities and power. Once firmly seated in Congress, their alliance with Northern Democrats reestablished their states restored to their former position inside the Union. It says, under the potent shield of state rights, the game will be in their own hands. Like, my man was a beast. Like, I when I was reading this, I was speechless. You know what I'm saying? I was speechless when I was reading some of this. Then he had the color line where he talk about he goes on to talk about race. A lot of this he was talking about how in some of the earlier speeches he was talking about how Africa would be was like a beam of light for African Americans at the time, or black people in America at the time, because with every independent state, it was more of a fervor in America to get free, to fight for their freedom and stuff like that. Then he goes on to talk about John Brown. John Brown, he was a beast. He talks about him. He was one of the greatest allies we ever had. And then he goes, he talks about the race problem. He ends it with the race problem in here. And he talks about it's no problem. The South, or they tried to manipulate the North into saying the problem was the Negro, and saying, because we were just getting out of slavery, a lot of us were illiterate, a lot of us were unemployed, in poverty, that the states, again, state rights, the states should take care of this, instead of it being a national endeavor. So what he was saying is they peddled this thing called the Negro Problem, which made it seem like the Negro was the problem in the South, instead of it being, the fact that it's a race problem, period, in the U.S., and he draws different examples to show how it's not a problem once the problem was fixed. He pretty much saying once the problem with Negroes at the time was that they weren't free. Now that they're free, there's no problem. They need to just let us do us, and keep it moving. We fail on our own failures, and we thrive on our own successes. So again, man, check out this book. With this book, it strongly influenced me to start reading, the lesser known writings and speeches and books from the other great, leaders and authors at the time, like W.B. Du Bois, Booker T, Garvey. I'm actually editing some Garvey right now that I'm gonna be putting out. As far as the ancient Egyptian religion, I'm actually editing my own Book of the Dead, and I'm gonna be putting together some notes as far as from different sources after reading that Book of the Dead and reading these sources, and I'm gonna put together my opinion and some notes on it as well. So yeah, it was a joy. I tried to keep it at 15 minutes, but I went to 25. But Until next time, it's your man B. I am the brand, and I'm out. Peace.